There's a lot going on behind the scenes of Pawn Stars. Not only does the cast have to listen to producers, they also have to operate within the boundaries of Nevada's laws. Here are some of the rules that the cast of Pawn Stars have to follow, whether they're on camera or working in the shop.
Chum,
Yeah?
this guy's got Pokemon cards.
Rick, it's not Pokemon. It's Pokemon.
At this point, it should come as no surprise to fans of any reality TV show that what they're watching isn't always 100% authentic, and Pawn Stars is no different in that respect. But in fairness, with a show like Pawn Stars, it would be impossible to film a decent episode in a reasonable time frame without doing a little planning in advance. One of the most important rules that the cast must follow is allowing the items that appear in each episode to be selected before the cameras start rolling. They can't simply let people in off the street and in front of cameras with the hopes that it will make for good TV. It would just be too risky. So when a seller brings a unique object up to the counter, the cast already knows what they're getting. Every single day, many people come to Las Vegas just to swing by the gold and silver pawn shop in hopes of catching a glimpse of the cast. But as much as the fans would probably love to hang around while the crew is shooting, it's just not possible. This is because the shop actually closes while new episodes are being filmed. After all, they can't have too many random people wandering around the set while trying to shoot, as it would probably result in countless fans attempting to get their faces on TV and getting in the way of the crew while they try to work. The shop still does just fine on the business end, even though they do have to close on a regular basis for filming. So many people come by when the shop is open that they don't really have to operate on normal business hours to stay open. It's actually one of the most visited tourist attractions in Las Vegas. Fame does come with some unexpected consequences, and Pawn Stars is no exception to the rule.
Oh yeah, brother!
The cast is actually no longer allowed to work behind the main counter due to Nevada's privacy laws. The producers felt that too many people were snapping photos of the cast, which meant that the people milling around in the background would be caught on camera very frequently. This would be a violation of their right to privacy. Therefore, to be on the safe side, they keep the cast away from the crowds. When it's time to shoot the show, the general public has to make their exit. You'll notice people milling around in the background of most shots, but those aren't random customers who just wandered in off the street. They're extras who were already cast to be there. When the cast and crew are checking out items that the sellers submit with the hopes of appearing on the show, they also have a discussion with the seller. They don't just want to haggle with people who happen to own interesting things with a fascinating history. They also want to make sure that they're talking with people who can be reasonable about prices and actually go through pre-negotiations before potential sellers get on camera. Of course, every once in a while, someone who appears on the show will be a bit unrealistic about the value of their item, and they won't budge when the cast makes a counteroffer. For the most part, producers want to ensure that the sellers are bringing in items that will not only be intriguing for viewers to learn about, but that the sellers will be fair about their suggested prices. After all, going through hours and hours of filming without buying a single item would make for a pretty boring episode. Sellers are also given some coaching so that they will appear more confident on TV. Like most reality TV shows, the cast of Pawn Stars has to work off of a script. They can't just enter a negotiation blind and tell the seller whatever they feel. The writers already have a general idea of how things should play out in order to keep the audience entertained. They do their best to keep things natural and make it sound like an off-the-cuff conversation. And of course, they take the personalities of the cast members and their typical mannerisms into consideration. The script is supposed to be organic, rather than coming across as stiff and unrealistic. Does all of this planning and scripting mean that Pawn Stars is really fake? Not really. The items are real antiques that belong to normal people. They just happen to have been selected beforehand, rather than just showing up at the shop with no warning. The sales are real too, but the cast has already walked through the negotiation in advance to ensure that no one's time is being wasted. The audience is just seeing a polished version of all of these interactions. So, the negotiations for the show are basically pre-planned before it all goes down in front of the camera. That said, the cast does have personal rules for negotiations to push the outcome in their favor. Rick revealed one detail to CNN when he said, "You should never, ever give the first number. As a buyer, you don't want to risk coming in first with a high price." The cast knows that if they come into the negotiation with an asking price higher than the seller's expectations, they probably won't get the best deal that they could. Instead, they will always wait for the seller to set the asking price.
What do you want for it? And don't be crazy, man. I mean, I got to make money here too.
Okay. Well, I'm going to say like 10 grand.
That way, they can work from there and adjust their own requests, with the aim of getting the most value for the shop. Fans probably know by now that this is one of their so-called trade secrets. as it's a pattern on the show. Known or not, it never seems to stop sellers from coming in to pawn their valuables. Even if a certain item has an incredible history and is still in great condition, the cast and crew can't accept just anything that they personally like. Before the vetting process for sellers and items even begins, they have certain rules to follow about what they can and can't buy. For example, they can't take any items of antique furniture as they simply don't have the room for it. Beanie Babies are off limits, so anyone who stocked up on these stuffed animals during the 90s and hoped that they would be able to sell them for a high price one day is out of luck. They do buy firearms on the show fairly often, but they can only accept firearms that were manufactured by 1898 or earlier. As far as sports cards go, they are only in the market for cards that were printed in the 60s or before. Nevada has some pretty thorough legal restrictions for pawn shops. Obviously, there are plenty of these shops operating around the Las Vegas area, but they do have to operate according to certain regulations. Pawn shops are sometimes seen as seedy businesses, so people might be surprised by all the rules that the state requires the shops to follow. Behind the scenes, the Pawn Stars cast has a long to-do list to complete that might not be interesting for the viewers to watch, but it's crucial to keeping the shop running. One strange law that stands out is that pawn shops are required to keep a physical description of every seller on record. Every sale has to be thoroughly documented, including details that people might find insignificant. The pawn shop buyers even have to give a description of the hair color, skin color, and facial appearance of the seller. You might assume that since all of the sellers on the show appear on camera, the rule might not apply. But just because their appearance was technically documented on film doesn't mean that the staff gets to skirt that particular rule. One of their other crucial daily responsibilities includes sending a daily report of all the shop's transactions to local law enforcement. If there are any legal issues with the sellers and their items, the police need to have everything in writing to deal with it. It might seem safe to assume that the cast would be able to personally appraise the items that potential sellers present, but that actually falls outside the realm of their responsibilities.
Truth is, I know very little about it, so I called you down here because I just wanted you to look at it and see what you know about it.
In fact, the cast doesn't handle any appraisals. If a seller brings in an item of unknown origin, Rick and friends are not the ones who will help them figure out what they have on their hands. This might come as a disappointment to some sellers, but the cast is more than willing to help people connect with outside third-party appraisal services and trusted individuals that they've worked with before. Pawn Stars regularly brings experts on the show who are more than capable of helping out. After all, it would put way too much pressure on their staff to manage appraisals along with all the other work that goes into running the business and the show. The cast of Pawn Stars aren't typical reality TV stars. One major distinction between the Pawn Stars cast and the stars of other popular reality shows is that being on the series isn't really their main responsibility. They still have to show up and work most days, and while they can't be behind the main counter anymore, there's no shortage of things for them to do in their shop. Some of the cast members have other jobs as well. For example, Chumlee spends several afternoons each week working in his candy store, where fans can stop in and see him on the job. Rick also owns his own bar, Rick's Roll and Smoke Barbecue, where he bartends on weekends. Perhaps this is one reason that Pawn Stars is still such a popular reality show. At the end of the day, the cast still has to get up in the morning, go to work, and do their jobs well, regardless of how famous they are. It's that feeling of relatability that has kept people watching for over a decade. Pawn shops can have a rough reputation, and it's easy to imagine that someone who works behind the counter would be willing to do business with almost anyone who walked through the door. But that's not how things go at Gold and Silver Pawn Shop, a fact that Rick Harrison has always made clear. Harrison has stated that he and his employees would not buy items from people who clearly had too much to drink. In an interview with NPR, Harrison said, "If someone's really intoxicated or something like that, they don't know what they're doing, they don't know what they're getting into, and I'm not going to deal with it. I tell my employees, a drink or two is fine, but if they're got a good buzz going on, it ain't happening." Harrison always wanted to illustrate that not all pawn shops deserved a bad rap, and that his shop could show a more positive side of the business. He made sure that everyone followed rules like this for a reason. He was a true professional. There are a few surprising rules at Gold and Silver Pawn, but perhaps the most surprising at all is the fact that Harrison actually keeps certain items off limits when it comes to sales. For example, Harrison has admitted that he held on to certain items for years. He kept several Olympic medals, Super Bowl rings, 3 NBA championship rings, and more. Instead of selling these objects, Harrison puts them on display. Why would a pawn shop owner hold on to extremely valuable items rather than selling them? When he got into the business, it was actually a smart sales tactic. People would see this impressive collection in the shop, and they figured that Harrison must be a very savvy businessman. Speaking with NPR, Harrison said, It's what keeps people coming back into my store. Before I had the television show, I needed that draw. We would always have at least one Picasso on the wall. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about your favorite stars are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.